As I walked home from another long day at the office, the black cat appeared again, sitting still as a statue on the cracked sidewalk ahead. Its golden eyes gleamed in the fading daylight, boring into me. I clutched the rabbit's foot keychain in my pocket, hoping the token of good luck could ward off the omen of misfortune before me. But deep down, I knew it was futile. The cat had been following me for days now, a shadowy specter heralding approaching darkness. With it came an unshakable sense of dread and impending calamity. Superstitious, they called me, often with a condescending chuckle. But they didn't understand. The broken mirrors, indoor umbrellas, and taunting black cats weren't just silly old wives' tales to me. No, each sign and portent carried a weight, a symbolism that couldn't be ignored. I had learned long ago to heed these warnings from some unseen realm. Failing to do so always led to catastrophe. My family understood. Superstition was in our bones, as much a part of us as the blood in our veins. My parents had drilled into me since childhood the importance of respecting unseen forces, of the dangers of tempting fate. Salt over the shoulder, never walk under a ladder, always carry your lucky charms. These lessons were as vital as reading and writing in our household. While the other kids rolled their eyes, I nodded and absorbed every word. Fear, my father always said, was the truest motivator of all, more potent than love, ambition, or even survival instinct. It pushed us forward, compelling us to build legacies, avoid risks, and stay close to kin. Most importantly, it kept the evil eye at bay. Those who claimed to conquer fear were either fools or liars. You couldn't fight it any more than you could stop breathing and live. The only path was to embrace it, allow it to guide and protect you. This, more than anything, kept our family close. United by our shared understanding of the unseen currents that shaped destiny, bonded by the knowledge passed through generations. There was safety and power in our secretive traditions, a circle of salt none dared cross. And yet, even salt circles can be broken. My teenage years brought with them a sort of weariness, an itchy skepticism at the back of my mind. While I never dared voice it aloud, I couldn't help but wonder, if we were solely defined by our family and their superstitions, who were we really? Did we even have our own identities, our own agency? Or were we mere leaves, thinking we directed the course of the river that swept us along? These dangerous thoughts festered quietly as I finished school and entered the workforce. I chose a sensible job in a sensible field, donned the costume of a responsible adult. But even as I went through the motions, a sense of claustrophobia haunted me, growing stronger by the day. The salt circle that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison, the close-knit family a chain around my neck. I loved them dearly still, but staying meant suffocating. Leaving meant losing myself entirely. In the end, fear decided for me. The fear of vanishing into the tapestry of ancestors, of never discovering who I was beneath the layers of lore and ritual. Never learning if I could stand on my own, believe in my own power. So I did the unthinkable. I stepped out of the circle, packed a bag and boarded a bus to the city, with no real plan except getting as far as I could from everything I knew. I didn't tell a soul, knowing they would never understand, would never forgive such a betrayal. That had been 5 years ago. 5 long years of carving out a fragile identity piece by piece, of learning to walk in a world devoid of omens and charms. It was a sort of freedom, but a terrifying one, like learning to swim in the middle of a vast ocean. I had a decent job, a cramped apartment, a few friendly acquaintances I hesitated to call friends. But still, I felt adrift, anchorless, alone in a way I had never been before. Then the black cat appeared. I noticed it one morning as I left for work, perched on the hood of my rusty sedan. It watched me with lamp-like eyes, still and intent as a hunter. A prickle ran down my spine and I hurried to the bus stop, trying to shake off the icy dread pooling in my stomach. It was waiting outside my office building when I arrived, and again at the cafe where I ate lunch. By the time I saw it peering at me from the window ledge of my apartment that night, I knew this was no ordinary stray. The old lessons flooded back, bone deep and inexorable as the tides. A black cat's unblinking stare, golden eyes flashing in the darkness, the most dire of omens. Catastrophe, disaster, death. The message was clear as ripples in a scrying bowl. I tried to ward off the coming storm with every scrap of half-remembered lore. Clumsily assembled charms and herbs, a line of salt across the threshold, whispering the old words that felt like marbles in my unpracticed mouth. But each day, the cat drew closer, its gaze more piercing. A murder of crows took to circling overhead, their raucous cries cleaving the air like an axe. I knew with grim certainty that my pitiful efforts were crumbling ramparts against the curse's onslaught. And still, even as icy talons of fear seized my heart, a part of me thrilled at the electrifying sensation. Fear, that old friend, pulsed through my veins like a drumbeat, more invigorating than it had ever been stifled by charms and rituals. It pulled me into sharp focus, every sense vibrating, every nerve alight. I felt paradoxically more alive than I had in years. At work, I moved in a daze, unable to concentrate on anything but the cat lurking outside and the tingle of dread twining around my spine. My few friends commented on how pallid and distracted I seemed, but their words barely registered. The curse had cut me off from their world as neatly as a snipped marionette string. A week passed this way, then another. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Shuffled through my days in a haze of bated breath and cold sweat, waiting for the trap to spring, for the doom promised by those golden eyes to crash over me. But the cat remained on the periphery, weaving closer and closer but never pouncing. Crows spiraled maddeningly overhead, their shadows swooping across my path. Bad luck buffeted me from all directions. Keys snapped in locks, light bulbs burst, coffee mugs shattered on the floor. But the killing blow remained withheld, a sword of Damocles never permitted to fall. Maybe this was the true punishment, I thought in my tenuous moments of lucidity. An exile not only from my family, but from closure, from any sense of control over my fate. To shiver forever in the clutches of fear without the release of calamity. A hazy purgatory between the strike of the match and the spark catching flame. Finally, at the end of my fraying rope, I did the unthinkable. One night, I stepped out into the street, heart thudding a staccato rhythm in my ears. The cat was there, watching from beneath a sputtering street lamp, eyes glowing like cursed lanterns. Slowly, I walked toward it, legs numb, breath coming sharp and jagged. Every instinct screamed to turn back, that to approach it was to stare into my own grave, to embrace my destruction. But I couldn't stop. If cataclysm was to be my fate, let it come. Let the sword fall. One step, then another. The night closed around me thick as velvet. Blood roared between my ears. Inches away now, close enough to see the glimmer off obsidian fur, to feel the heat of its gaze. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for I knew not what. A slash of claws, a hiss slicing the air, sudden pain blooming in my chest. But there was only silence, still and deep as an abyss. Nothing but the thump of my own wild pulse. I opened my eyes. The cat was gone. The street was empty, washed gray in the anemic gleam of the streetlights. For a long moment I stood, fighting the urge to laugh and cry in equal measures. Then, like a marionette with cut strings, I turned and trudged back into my building. That night, I dreamed I was back home, walking through my parents' house. It was exactly as I remembered it, every knick-knack and photograph in its place. I drifted through the rooms in a daze, trailing my fingers over the horseshoes hung above each doorway, the dried four-leaf clovers pressed beneath glass on the mantel. In the kitchen, I found my mother standing at the stove, her back to me. She was humming tunelessly as she cooked, some old ballad about maidens and curses. The familiarity of it brought tears to my eyes. I stepped closer, opening my mouth to call out to her, but the words died in my throat. It wasn't my mother at all. It was the black cat, standing upright, reaching to stir a pot with eerily human paws. As I watched in mute horror, it turned to face me, a grotesque grin splitting its features. "Welcome home," it purred, golden eyes flashing. Then I woke, gasping, bedsheets tangled around my legs. The dream clung to me in viscous shreds I couldn't shake off. Trembling, I stumbled into the kitchen for a glass of water, my pulse a staccato drumbeat. But when I turned on the tap, the water ran red as blood. I shrieked and leapt back, the glass slipping from my numb fingers to shatter on the tile. In a panic, I charged for the front door, shoes crunching on broken shards. I had to get out, away from this haunted place, away from the curse that had finally caught up to me. But when I wrenched open the door, I found myself staring not at the dingy hallway, but into my parents' living room. My mother was sitting on the sofa, a black cat curled on her lap. She looked up at me and smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "I knew you'd come back," she said calmly. "You never should have left. You belong here with us." I stumbled backwards, head reeling, gagging on my hammering heart. This couldn't be real. It had to be another dream, some conjured phantasm of my cracking mind. But deep in my traitorous bones, I knew the truth. The curse had just been the harbinger, the clarion call. This was the true calamity, the only one there had ever been. The yawning maw of everything I had ever tried to be, swallowing me whole. Fighting back a sob, I took a halting step into the room, the door swinging shut behind me with a grim finality. The cat on my mother's lap stretched languorously and fixed me with its tallow gleam eyes. In the end, maybe there really had only ever been two paths: to be consumed by fear, or to embrace it wholly, burrow into its darkest heart and become it. As I sank to my knees on the achingly familiar carpet, part of me already knew which I had chosen. Knew it as surely as I tasted copper on my tongue, felt the curse twining around my hammering heart. "Welcome home, dear," my mother said softly. "We missed you." This time, her smile sliced through me like a knife, and there was nothing I could do but smile back. For what was family except to fear each other? An unbreakable bond of blood and darkness that never, ever let go. In my exile, I had finally learned the greatest lesson of all. That when you chose to step out of the circle, it would always be there, waiting patiently to welcome you back. The black cat's eyes glowed in triumph, twin golden suns. I greeted it like an old friend. In the depths of that cursed, longed-for house, I finally stopped running.